Yeah, ever since the Jackson podcast interview, I really don't just do none of that shit anymore. It's like they kind of killed it for everybody. And speaking of that, they still owe me a couple grand, and they always do a bad job of paying me on the first of the month. They always pay like around like the 10th or something like that. I don't know if they're having a money problem, but they need to do a better job paying me on time. So, future reference for all you guys that want to do interviews, I charge out the ass now. So, unless you're getting it this week, you ain't getting one. No. Get off his dick. Thank you. I'm out of here, guys. Have a good day.
Alright, so Kevin Holland still seems to have a 4570 lodged up his ass over his Jackson podcast appearance from a couple of months ago because yesterday, unprompted, he blamed Rampage for being the reason he no longer does interviews anymore. You know, it's funny, Kevin used to be an immature yet pretty jovial guy, and he's still immature, don't get me wrong, but nowadays he seems so bitter and arrogant. And let's be real here, Kevin's never been anywhere close to being an elite fighter, but his appeal used to be set in the fact that he was a likable guy that fights frequently. He used to be an affable dude that didn't take things too seriously, and he always seemed to have fun in and out of the octagon, but nowadays he comes off like he's too cool for school. And going back to the clip that I just showed you, he acts like he isn't the guy that made his own Jackson podcast feature a disaster. Hey Kevin, I know that accountability isn't your strongest quality, but you are the one who walked into that podcast acting straight up hostile and belligerent. He's making it seem like Rampage and Bear ambushed him with a bunch of uncomfortable questions, when in reality it was him who walked onto the set looking for trouble. Honestly, I feel like he had this preconceived notion that he was walking into a 2-on-1 that day, and ever since then he refuses to acknowledge that he was in the wrong. Not only that, the fact that he's saying that he doesn't do media interviews outside of fight week anymore because of the Jackson podcast just reeks of insecurity. I 100% guarantee you that he's afraid of reporters asking him questions about Rampage and his temper tantrum and making him look bad. And it's like, you know, most UFC fighters never do outside interviews, and that's fine. Most fighters don't get asked to do interviews, and I'd argue that most fighters don't even like doing them in the first place. If Kevin doesn't want to do interviews outside of fight week, that's his own prerogative. But to blame the Jackson podcast for it and say that they ruined it for everyone is so childish, but frankly that's pretty on brand for him. And I don't know if it's the money or the fame or both that's gone to his head, but now he's saying that he won't come out to do interviews anymore unless he gets paid for it. Which leads me to my next point. Who in their right mind is going to pay this guy to do an interview? Who does Kevin think he is? How big of a name does this guy think he has? Again, the money or the fame or both has convinced this guy that he's something that he's not, to the point where he thinks that people will pay a 27-13 unranked journeyman for an interview. Nah, I'm just kidding. This is clearly just a defense mechanism that he's using to justify not having to answer for his actions. The only reason people even cared about Kevin Holland to begin with was because he was fun, he was accessible, and he kept it light. Now he's making himself completely unmarketable while simultaneously pointing the blame elsewhere.
All right, one other question. How is your current relationship with Rampage Jackson?
My current relationship with Rampage Jackson? Bro, Rampage Jackson's not in the UFC, is he?
No.
Get off his dick. Thank you. I'm out of here, guys. Have a good day.
Jesus Christ, talk about taking his ball and going home. This guy is still so salty towards Rampage that he dropped the mic and stormed off the stage when asked about him. For a little bit of context here, let's take a look at how long some of the other Media Day interviews were. Sean O'Malley's was 19 minutes, Kayla Harrison's was 23 minutes, and Marab's was 24 minutes. Kevin's was 8 minutes long. This interview was definitely supposed to be at least 2 times longer than it was. And for those of you guys who might be saying that the reporter shouldn't have brought up Rampage, I doubt he would have done so if Holland didn't bring him up earlier. You know, a big part of Kevin's appeal when he first got into the UFC is that he wasn't afraid of being honest when it came to tough questions, and even though it was clear he was never going to be a champion, it always felt like he was just happy to be here. He won some, he lost some, but in a sport where very few will ever become champion, it was very refreshing to watch a guy who genuinely enjoyed the experience regardless of the outcome of his fights. Now I ask you this, what is the appeal of a Kevin Holland who's still the same level of a fighter as he was 5 years ago, but lost the attitude that made fans like him in the first place? Sure, his strength of schedule is still really impressive, and his fights are always fun. And maybe I'm just speaking for myself here when I say this, but Kevin the guy was much more interesting to me than Kevin the fighter, if that makes sense. Now that I think about it, Rampage Jackson was kind of the same way for me. Of course, it's not a one-to-one comparison. Rampage actually won a title, whereas Kevin never will. Rampage was a top fighter for years, whereas Kevin's a jobber. But could you imagine if one day Rampage all of a sudden started taking himself too seriously? I mean, sure, he had his moments of intensity, but some of his most memorable career moments are him making fun of Ariel Helwani and goofing around on The Ultimate Fighter. And listen, Rampage has done some things that I really don't agree with, but my point remains. He understood that making himself as fun to watch outside of the ring was every bit as important as putting on a show inside of it. Kevin, on the other hand, seems to have forgotten or just simply no longer cares about being someone fans want to root for. Now, as I said earlier in the video, this is not the first time that Holland has shown up in front of cameras acting like someone pissed in his cereal, and I never made a video about his appearance on the Jackson podcast, so let me give my thoughts on it really quickly. Obviously, this is where the birth of the 4570 meme came from.
Since we've been on
we're sitting across the table, we're both shooting 45-70s. We're trying to see who can hit the target. I don't have much of an ego.
Well, I'm just.
Do you know what a 45-70 is?
I'm just telling.
Do you know what a 45-70 is?
I'm just telling.
If it's not a 45-70 that we're shooting across the room, do you know what a 45-70 is?
No, I don't.
Okay, then shut the fuck up.
Because
you don't understand what a 45-70 is.
He doesn't know what a 45.
You're talking about ego. Now I'm giving you some ego.
Okay, so,
Ego is when you don't understand what a 45-70 is.
Okay.
What type of man are you don't know what a 45-70 is?
Because I don't know what a 45-70
Yeah,
is.
you should know what a 45-70 is.
What is
Why?
it, Kevin? Tell
You're
us
a
what
big
it
guy.
is.
You should know what a 45-70
Why-
is.
Kevin, what do you shoot?
I like the 45-70.
Yeah.
We can see that.
But what you may ask is the reason for why Holland was so angry at Rampage. As you can probably expect, it's over something really dumb.
You did say
I did nothing.
You did something on some comment. You're on.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yes.
So you didn't know? Okay, when he fought MVP, does this thing right here, and Kevin Holland reached up and touched his hand like that, and I made a joke, and it wasn't even that funny.
Was it like this one where they do the?
No, that was being funny. I said, "Oh, them touching hands like that reminds me of two women scissoring."
And he got mad at that?
Yeah, come on.
Oh, there's nothing. That's
There's
okay.
nothing, right?
Jesus Christ, man, this dude's ego has become so fragile. You know, I've always thought it's pathetic when guys are always roasting the people around them, but the moment someone dishes it back at them, they take it so personally. And in this case here, Kevin got so butthurt over one of Rampage's classic bad jokes, even though he's always tried to position himself as someone with a sense of humor. You know what I really hate about this conversation? It's his shit-eating grin and his condescending vibe as he talks down to Rampage. The fact that he tried to little bro Rampage over something as meaningless as his knowledge about guns is so immature. I respect Rampage for taking the high road throughout all of this because it would be so easy for him to simply ask Kevin what he knows about being a UFC champion or even just being a part of a title fight in general. Also, does anybody find it bizarre that Kevin clearly cares more about his self-image than he does about his fighting career? He seriously got more worked up over a simple joke made at his expense than any loss he's ever taken in the UFC. I really don't understand him and how he chooses to get selectively angry at things that aren't even that serious, but when it comes to his primary source of income, he's made it clear that he couldn't care less. Is it crazy to say that if he took his UFC fights as seriously as he does 45-70s, then he wouldn't be 2-4 in his last 6 fights? If Kevin adopted this level of ego for his job, then God forbid he might actually break out from being a journeyman and become an elite fighter, but nah, that makes too much sense.
No pressure at all. I mean, Gunner has to be entertaining as well. I mean, if guys go out with the same game plan as RDR and shoot 3 seconds of the fight and look for a choke, I mean, if people think that's entertaining, great for them, but I mean, it's kind of fucking boring, but it is what it is.
Leave it to the guy that's been consistently out-wrestled throughout his entire UFC career to complain about how boring it is for guys to submit him early into the fight. Like, bro, if you're so concerned about how boring it is when guys submit you, how about you actually work on your grappling defense? You chose to be a professional MMA fighter.
That's just kind of how I picture it. You know, it's like when he lost his belts at the last organization, he kind of just faded and gave the belts away. So it's like maybe that's what he does. He fades and gives it away.
The irony of Kevin implying that RDR is a quitter who fades and gives it away when Kevin let his career fade and gave it away by not actually improving. He's still the same exact fighter that he was back in 2020. He walked into the UFC mid but with a ton of potential, and fast forward to now, he's still mid and stuck as an unranked gatekeeper.
Why are you not focused on the belt? Like, why is that something that doesn't...
Why are you guys so focused on the fucking belt all the time? Like,
Well, I
excuse
mean-
my language, but why are you so focused on the belt? I just told you I'm not worried about the belt, and you go back and repeat, ask me about the belt. Like, I'm not worried about the belt. Why are you so worried about the belt? You don't even fight for a living. Why are you so worried about the belt?
Well, I'm not worried. I don't fight.
I'm not worried about it either. Why are you so worried about it?
That's why I'm asking. Well,
I'm not worried about it.
You say
That's
like-
that's the ultimate answer you need. I'm not worried about it. Why are you so worried about it?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking you because you say you want the big paydays, and usually that comes with pay-per-view points and whatnot. So you would assume that the big,
Maybe I'm already getting pay-per-view points.
maybe.
You don't know, right?
Sure.
True. All right.
All right.
Yeesh, somebody struck a nerve. Look, I totally understand that not every UFC fighter is going to be a champion, and I also understand that not every UFC fighter even wants to be a champion. But at the same time, I do think that how irritated he gets at such a trivial question speaks to how he feels about his situation. If he took his training and his development more seriously and was able to be a mainstay ranked fighter for a couple of years, he probably would have been able to make a whole lot more money than he makes now. Mind you, he's still one of the highest paid unranked fighters in the history of the UFC, so just imagine how much more he could have made if he was able to get the UFC marketing machine to actually justify positioning him as a contender. The reporter that Kevin snaps at makes a very good point. The top guys do make more money than him. And for a guy who talks about money so much, it feels pretty reasonable to ask him why he doesn't try to aspire for a title so that he can earn pay-per-view points. But instead of giving an honest answer, Kevin tries to make it seem like he might already be earning pay-per-view points, which is a ridiculous lie. There's a couple other examples from his interviews this year that show how much he's changed, but I'm not going to break down every single one. At the end of the day, Kevin's grown increasingly hard to to listen to because his attitude and his ego have gotten out of control. His immaturity made him look like a fool on Rampage's podcast, and even now his ego won't let it go to the point where he's storming out of interviews at the sound of his name. He's a different guy than he used to be, and it's definitely not for the better. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know your thoughts on Kevin's temper tantrum from yesterday. Do you think Kevin wins on Saturday? And even if he does, do you think his career has already peaked? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.